A new law could help tenants facing eviction stay in their homes. So this one is about housing. And so you'll see a lady down here packing all her things up. She's getting ready to move out of her apartment. And so I'm seeing for rent signs all over Inglewood. And Inglewood, I'm noticing, even though it's a part of LA County, it doesn't have the same rent controls that the city of LA has. So there's borders for different cities in the county of LA. And so right here, this is just telling people who are facing eviction that they might be able to fight a little longer to stay in their homes until they make decisions on plans of where they're going to make their next move. So a lot of people I was reading might be facing evictions and might also be looking at, here in California, a rise in more homelessness. And this is pretty serious. And earlier I was observing a lot of cities that are facing the housing crisis, not only with renting, but people who are homeowners are facing foreclosure in several cities, metropolitan cities, and some cities aren't even like here. Like Florida was one, Colorado, New Jersey, and then some in the South Carolina, facing some kind of crisis out there. It seems like it's everywhere. And everywhere you look, there's some type of housing issues. And I've been really paying attention to this because, I don't know, a couple of videos back, I was looking at some young people who were living out of storage units. And I saw a couple, they were a homeless couple, they were a TikTok homeless couple, and they were making money off TikTok. And then they kept telling people that they were going to try to get an RV, which I never saw them get an RV, but they were able to get in a hotel, but I guess they weren't paying the hotel fee, and they wound up outdoors again. And every video you saw them just living out in the back or in the woods somewhere, and it looked really, it seemed like they were organized and like they knew what to do, and like they were just like in camping mode, but that's the way they were living, to try to not have to pay rent and certain bills. And they were making do with what they had, but it looked also kind of risky and dangerous because you don't know who's out there, what animals are out there. And then some of the elements like the cold and the rain, you could see this couple was kind of going through living in those extreme conditions. And I hate to say this, but I'm afraid that a lot of more people might be facing some similar situations, just like that couple, living out, from hotel to hotel. And then I saw a documentary about these extended stay hotels that they make money off the homeless. So sometimes you think hotels would be cheaper. There are some hotels that tend to be more expensive than actually renting an apartment. And so I said, everywhere you turn, somebody trying to make money off of somebody's pain. I'm just trying to live. It's becoming a luxury just to simply live in adequate housing. And I think we have arrived to that place. And that's pretty sad. And a couple of other articles that I were looking at about this administration. And I have to be honest, they said that the Trump administration is actually making it harder for people to live in affordable housing. That has driven the cost of a lot of things up. And we can also point out some of the things that this administration has put more money forth rather than people's well-being and welfare. I know that healthcare premiums had went up dramatically that food prices had went up. They were told to people that those prices would go down, but they went the other way. They didn't go down, they went up. And meat is skyrocket, you know, all kinds of basic foods and things like that. And more money was given to ICE, agents being deployed in cities. And we see how that's turning out. And then the talk of, the healthcare industry, how a lot of people who had invested time studying to be nurses and whatnot in the healthcare field, they're now being classified as not even a profession. So we see where all of our interests and our money and our tax dollars are going as well. A lot of defunding of things you would think they would put more money in, like schools. They've taken money out of some public school funding. They cut Head Starts. All in California, they stopped the Head Starts. I believe it ain't just California either. So it just doesn't look really good at all. But here it's talking about a specific law that could help the tenants that are facing eviction stay in their homes. And so it seems like a really kind of a last resort. And so this lady, I guess her name is Maria Vela. She's trying to put her box and her things together to get ready to move out of her home. She stayed in East LA for about 30 years. And so people have tried to stay put because they don't have a lot of money to just be moving everywhere. So this article was by Felicia Mello. This was back in December of 2024. And so that's the start of all of this. So it's gotten worse since then. So the tenant advocates, they suffered a big defeat this fall when California voters decided against expanding cities' ability to limit rent increases. So the reason why I'm going back to this article in this year is because by this happening back in 2024, it hasn't been good in 2025. And now we're in 2026. And I'm hearing that a lot of more people might be homeless, such as this lady right here looking for another place to stay or either homeless altogether. So when they vote for things like this, it affects so many. But it says the state law is set to take effect January 1st. So that was in 2025. It gives renters facing eviction a little more breathing room, is what it says. So where are we now? So I know I was reading part of this article, but it's really bad. So this is right here, bringing it to April the 1st of 2025, affordable housing. This is commentary, but it's true. It says, with federal cuts that were looming, the future of affordable housing in California hangs in the balance. And so I had to bring it back to what's going on from before and how it's affecting us in the current times that we're living in. And so this is kind of grim, but it's true. And this is by David Greenwald, April the 1st, 2025. And so California, they grapple with one of the worst housing affordability crises in the nation. And the question is on the minds of many is what is happening to the affordability housing and the federal funding that disappears. So the Trump administration's budget proposal and recent trade policies are sending shockwaves through already a fragile foundation of low-income housing in California and all beyond. So it only gets worse. So this is what I was talking about. It says that the vouchers allow low-income families to pay more than 30% of their income on rent, and the government covering the rest. And so to pay no more than 30%. So the government will cover the rest. But in the market where the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco hovers around above $3,000, this kind of support is not just helpful, but it's a lifesaver. So it's like that out here in California, where you have one bedrooms that are almost $2,000 and two bedrooms that are running like $3,000 or more a month. And a lot of people can't afford that. They're just really rent burdened and they're hanging on by a thread, and you live in paycheck to paycheck, and you just can barely pay your utilities and your other exterior bills. But it says a safety net is now fraying. So according to a recent report, San Francisco Chronicle, while Section 8 funding received a temporary bump in a recent stopgap federal budget, the longer-term outlook is very bleak. And so the local housing authorities are already alarmed. So San Francisco Housing Authority has closed its waiting list and signaled that no one new to Section 8 recipients will be served under the current funding levels. So LA as well, their housing authority, they paused the process of thousands of applications due to federal budget uncertainty. And so when Section 8 funding falters, many families already living paycheck to paycheck, if they have one, fall through the cracks, and they're often forced to move into shelters, cars, encampments. And that's what we're seeing all over California, all over Las Vegas, all over in a lot of states, not just California, but California, if you want to look at it, we got a lot, what they used to call in the Great Depression, Hoovervilles. We have a lot of them, Oakland as well, and some other cities. We're seeing them everywhere, popping up everywhere, where people are, it's not just a joke. People are living out of their cars, making plans to move into like maybe RVs, maybe doubling up with family members and living like in and out of hotels and doubling up with friends. That's how things are going. So like Bayview, Hunters Point, as many as 1 in 3 households rely on those vouchers. So I'm seeing a lot of encampments everywhere. And so Skid Row is no longer the only place where you see homelessness. In California, Los Angeles, you see homeless encampments everywhere. And no matter how they try to sweep them away, in an hour they come back. All you're doing is cleaning up the sidewalk, cleaning up the trash, and then when you're gone, those encampments, they come back in full force. So that's what I've seen. So it says, what happens when those vouchers run dry? While the federal government pulls back on its commitment to affordability through the HUD cuts, President Trump's escalating trade war is exacerbating this housing crisis from another angle, the supply side. So as the next city reported earlier this month, that tariffs on construction materials like steel, lumber, aluminum, and home appliances are raising the cost of new housing developments across this country. So for affordable housing developers already struggling to make the math pencil out, like the math ain't math, and this could be the final blow. Developers like Monica Martinez of the Facts Partnership in Denver have already begun postponing or scrapping affordable housing projects due to escalating costs and uncertainty. And so her group is working on a 110 unit workforce housing project, but between skyrocketing construction expenses and looming HUD cuts, the deal no longer looks viable. In California, where the cost of land, labor, and materials already present enormous challenges to affordable housing construction, Trump's tariffs could add $10,000 or more to the cost of building a single home. Multiply that across thousands of units, the math becomes unsustainable, especially for nonprofit and mission-driven developers dependent on narrow funding margins and public subsidies. So just as troubling as the cuts to the program like Section 8 and the ripple effects of the tariffs is the Trump administration's plan to cut HUD workforce by 50%. So let me digress. I'm hearing that this January of 2026 is a downfall when it comes to some of these jobs. A lot of these jobs and some of the jobs that we all know, a lot of them are having huge layoffs. And so a lot of people are getting laid off jobs and having to take gig jobs or side hustles just to make a little bit of ends meet. People not knowing what they're going to do, and then also the Trump administration trying to bring back people paying for student loans. It just never seems to end. So it says that means slashing the staff responsible for processing rental subsidies, administering fair housing complaints, and overseeing the very programs that keep millions of people housed. So this is where we're at, y'all. And so it's not really looking good. According to the Washington Post report, it cited that the Chronicle, HUD may lose more than 4,000 employees under Trump's proposed budget. That's more than half of its workforce. So the ramifications go beyond simple delays. HUD's ability to respond to disaster recovery, maintain public housing stock, and enforce civil rights laws will all be compromised. So programs like the Green and the Resilient Retrofit program, which aim to modernize and preserve tens of thousands of affordable housing units, have already seen $1 billion in grants frozen. The cancellation of Section 4 capacity building grants for nonprofits could halt affordable housing development in hundreds of low-income and tribal communities nationwide. And that's communities, that is. So in California, where local governments and nonprofits rely on federal partners to fill gaps in housing markets, the loss of this capacity could paralyze progress. Enterprise Community Partners estimates HUD's cuts disrupts 44,000 planned housing units in California alone. So units that are already shovel ready, waiting for a final funding approvals, those are affected. So the justification for these cuts has largely rested on a familiar reframe: fiscal responsibility. But the truth is, there are not cost-saving measures, and they are ideological choices. So consider that while HUD funding is on the chopping block, the Trump administration continues to push for expansive tax cuts for corporations and high-income earners. So it is also prepared to spend billions on tariffs that raise prices for American consumers and businesses alike. But in that light, the decision to cut housing programs looks less like prudence and more like cruelty. As Ben Metcalf, former HUD official and current managing director at the Turner Center for Housing Innovation at UC Berkeley, put it, Section 8 is the last support network for most vulnerable subsets of many cities and metropolitan cities and communities, people who are on the low income earners. Even though it is not a huge share of total renters, it matters a ton. So if we strip the last support away, the social and economic costs will be immeasurable. More homelessness, more children living in cars, more seniors forced into unsafe housing, more emergency room visits, and more despair. So there is still time to change that course. Congress must reject proposed cuts to HUD and resist further tariffs that make housing more expensive to build. States like California need to redouble their own commitments to affordable housing, but they cannot do it alone. Federal partnerships, particularly for programs like Section 8 and low-income housing tax credits, remain essential. So that's pretty much that article right there. There's so many things that are happening here in California and in other states, but specifically here in California. You can see this right here was in April 2025. Rising rents and federal cutbacks are squeezing Section 8 programs from both ends. And for millions of Americans, that means fewer options, longer waits, and higher housing. And so it just doesn't look like that it has gotten any better. And with what's going on right now, what I'm seeing in a lot of these articles having to do with the housing in California is that homelessness could grow exponentially. I know back when they had the fires, that was instant homelessness for some of those people that were in a predicament where they didn't have enough money to rebuild their homes. But now we're going to have another wave of homelessness for people who they're getting kicked off these programs, and these programs, they don't have any more funding for it, or it's being frozen, or they being shut out. And with what just came out is if you've been on Section 8 for more than 2 years, you can't receive any of that. Is what it sounds like. There's some rules they put into place, and it looks like those priorities of housing people are no more. And so homelessness is inevitable. It's bound to grow. So with that being said, it's just sad the way this is looking for a lot of people. And we see all of these things with Skid Row. It looks bad. So you just pull up Skid Row. A lot of people say we've seen it all before, but this is 2025 right here. You know how they say they were going to clean up the streets? And so exploring the Skid Row, a tour guide, you don't really need a tour, but you can see, it's still there. It still remains. They have people trying to give people food, but not much is happening, to change things. As long as you have unaffordability, you're going to see a lot of cities that look like this. You're going to see a lot of new makeshift housing like tent cities and RV cities in California and Los Angeles County, all over. And if I was just to pan through some of the cities outside of California, you see something that looks just like this. And it's a mirrored image. So what do we ask ourselves? What is really going on? It's not just in LA. It seems to be like it's everywhere. You'll find people that are homeless in a lot of places. It's not just LA, it's everywhere. So, but anyway, I'm gonna let this go. I see a lot of I see a lot of this too. I'm going to show you this before I let this go, but this is something I also see a lot of. This is LA County, and so this is another form of homelessness. There are a lot of RVs, people living out of RVs, and they live not only out of tents but old RVs. So this is South LA. You see this a lot all up and down Vermont and in various places by the beach. You'll see these makeshift RVs where people are homeless. So this is another thing that's been happening, and it's been happening more often lately. So they tried to put up laws to try to stop people from living in these Winnebagos and RVs and things like this. But I mean, if you have nowhere else to go, I think they all move together, sort of like a community of RV homelessness, and they kind of move together, so they all kind of line up together. So they said they want to clean these things up, but when they clean them up, they just move to another area. So the homeless RV encampments of LA is real. So this is also growing all over the place because people still have some shelter. It's a step up from a tent, but you still you're in these old RVs. And so they have these little areas, these clearings, these little areas that don't have like maybe anybody really monitoring it as much. But I would think that this might be pretty dangerous as well, because you don't know who all's in the RVs and who you're next to and what you might encounter, and is it safe, because now you're not in an apartment, you're not in a house, you out off on the open street in an RV, and you don't know who's gonna come and try to break in on you. So I would bet you gotta maybe know a few people that maybe so you can feel safe. Even people are using old school buses to live out of, sleeping out of their cars. So this is what's going on. I'm showing you this is how LA is looking with the homelessness. It's everywhere. I mean, and let me see this one right here. Yeah, this is West LA. And so it looks like people are just camping, but these people live out of this because that's all they can afford. They got evicted, and it's various case by case reasons that's going on. So this is a big thing that is happening here in Los Angeles. It's Wildomar residents outraged that RVs from LA County homeless encampment arrive in their city. I suppose this is all over right here in this area right here. So people complain about rodents. They complain about a smell because of waste. Also maybe violence, and they think that maybe it might not be safe because you don't know who all is running these RV encampments. So now they do have some other places that are relief for homeless RV people. They have parking lots that are specific for people that have their own RV. But I guess maybe you have to maybe have a spot reserved for you. Maybe it's a safer option because some of those ones that are on the street that I showed you previous might not be as safe. You don't know who you're around once again. So they say it's the new Los Angeles of homelessness with the RV encampments. And also they they have porta potties that they put out, and hand washing in some little areas so that people can try to keep some of the germs down. So I'm just showing you that's what's happening, and it's growing all over. And so this right here is a homeless camp along Los Angeles River, a city of Paramount, South LA, California, right here. And you can see all the trash and everything. See some stock photos. Sometimes they come and clean it up, but as soon as they clean it up, let me tell you, those people in within the hour and a half, they come back. You just cleaning it up for them so that they can set up camp all over again, because they don't have nowhere to go. And a lot of these people been here for maybe many years. They can't afford to move out of the city. So if they can't afford to live in, and they can't afford to move out of the city, then this is what you see happening to a lot of these people. And then this is also what you see happening to some of these RVs. They end up getting burnt. Somebody's cooking and something catches on fire. So you see a lot of this all over. So I'm just showing you some of what is going on here. And this is not just, this is just not only in California. So this article was talking about how they towed the RVs without offering help to increase help to the homeless, and it just increases homelessness when they tow the RVs. The people don't have nothing to put their things in. They want them to disappear and move. They give them tickets and different things like that. So you'll find all kind of articles in the LA Times about how they treat these people. The real reason why LA has so many RV homeless encampments. There's so many articles. It's all over the place because this is becoming a big thing that people have been doing, because they decide that they just want to have some kind of shelter of some sort. But you see this right here. Some of these RVs, they get burnt up or they get destroyed. Something happens, or there's violence, or maybe some undesirable individuals that are encamped in those areas. So RV wasteland is what they call this one, a stretch of LA County populated with hundreds of broken down RVs. So some people live out of old broken down RVs as well. So rather than new ones. So this is becoming a thing. And then then you have people that are living out of storage units. And so shipping container homes for the homeless in LA, they are using those to try to do a new material for housing. They had the tiny homes, but then they have this new thing where people are not supposed to do this, but they had people that were living out of storage units, and it wasn't something they were supposed to do. But they also have these tiny home villages, and then they had a ban even on the homeless. So this right here was talking about a Supreme Court empowers cities to ban homeless encampments. So instead of remedying the problem, they ban the homelessness. So this right here looks like it is a tiny home village, and the people can only stay there for so long. From what I'm hearing, they can't stay there indefinitely. But these are public storage units. So I'm seeing that some people are living out of public storage units. So so this person is a good example of a person that is living out of a storage unit. And so living homeless in a storage unit. And so this is also another thing that's been happening more often. They have their belongings in there. They're paying rent for the storage unit, but they're also sleeping in there overnight because they don't have anywhere else to live, anywhere else to stay. So that's what, people are starting to see. We're starting to see more videos coming out of people saying that that's what they're doing in order to stay, in some type of makeshift shelter. So they probably sleep on boxes, and maybe they sleep, overnight. And you're seeing a lot of people that they have all of their belongings, but they're also in the back and they're staying out of the storage units. And so in the front it looks like it's just their belongings, but all the way in the back, the people, they actually live there. So living homeless in a storage unit. So that is also what's going on. So I felt like I would make this video because homeless crisis is real. It is getting worse. And it's not getting better. And this is becoming a big problem. And it's not just here in California, but we do have a lot of homelessness here. And we're seeing it just seem to grow every day. And I hear in Inglewood, the city of Inglewood, they made all these stadiums here. They have a stadium they were building in Carson, I believe a football stadium. They had a stadium for basketball and a stadium for football in Inglewood. They have, all these big venues, and just to get one ticket is like your whole rent for a month or 2 months. Most of the locals can't really afford that. People thought it was going to create jobs. They thought it was going to maybe help the community. And it seems like it's really entertainment for the wealthy and the people who can't afford it. And not very many jobs that are stable in those areas. I mean, they hire over there, but they hire in mass or in seasonal events. And then they lay off big. There's high turnovers. So people, it's not like really people stay there long term too much. So, and they don't pay very well. So that's the other thing. Even though they have all these fancy venues, they don't pay fancy wages. So they're making restaurants, they're making all kinds of venues for people to spend their money, but they're not making places that are affordable so people can stay in the surrounding neighborhood and thrive. So we see where people are putting their money at, pretty much. That's to say that so California Skid Row, once again, I'm just going to say it is growing. And I think with all of what's going on, the anger is building. It's like like a pot that's boiling over. We have ICE agent issues, people getting hurt, killed, gunned down, labeled a terrorist. Then you have the housing crisis. You have all these issues, and then these layoffs with these jobs. Just your essential basic needs at threat. And when people's basic needs are at threat, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? None of this looks good at all. And I mean for no one at all.